Hello everyone, amateur meteorologist first, and with you here it is September 27th, 2020, and as you can see right here from the National Weather Service tropical cyclone activity, you can see that no activity is expected over the next 48 hours, and this is definitely a welcome relief after the very active past 3 weeks we've had. But this break in activity doesn't look to be too long-lived. It looks like after about the middle of this week, we will start to see things heating up again slowly. And there also are signals that by the end of the first week of October, we could see another spike in activity, as this is around the peak of hurricane season, or the latter half of the peak. So definitely not surprising to see. This is just one of those quick little lulls that you're having in the tropical Atlantic. Now, if we switch gears to the GFS model, this is a 500 millibar geopotential height. As you can see, this is valid for 0Z Monday, September 28th. You can see a nice little cold front coming through, a nice little trough of dry air coming in behind that. And this is going to gradually move to the east, delivering a nice cool shot of fall-like air for many in the upper Midwest, in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, even as far south as Texas and Arkansas. So definitely a nice little blast of cold air. If we go through time, you can see that trough digs deeper down, and then you can see a little, almost an upper level low trying to form, but not quite. And the GFS then does form actually an upper level low, and then pivots this around an axis. And takes this up basically along the I-95 corridor. And then this is October 2nd, which is the end of this week, which is Friday, which is the end of the work week. And you can see we have a very highly amplified pattern of a nice strong ridge in the west and a big trough in the east. So temperatures running 10, 15 degrees below average in the eastern part of the country, and 10 to 15 degrees above average in the western portion. And this is not good news for the wildfire ravaged areas in California, Colorado, Arizona, Oregon, because with this heat, you're going to see some really warm temperatures, and that is certainly not good for for all that fuel that is now in place, and with lack of precip due to that very strong ridge you're seeing. Wildfire conditions are going to be turning favorable once again as you have that big amplification of the jet stream. And while in the eastern part of the country, things will remain wet at first as that trough comes through, and then a prolonged period of also dry conditions as you're having those persistent northwesterly winds delivering cold continental air. And as we go even further through time, you can see that trough really just digs in place. This is according to the GFS model. This is October 3rd, still troughing in place over the east, below average conditions. Now, finally, around October 6th, we really start to see things moderating just a bit. But then again, look after that, another big trough coming in to the east and a big ridge to the west. How true is this? We don't know, but you get the point. The model is indicating that the pattern is going to be very amplified over the next 10 to 14 days at least. With conditions favoring troughing in the east and ridging in the west, especially over the next 7 days, especially after this Tuesday. And you can see with temperature anomalies, or let me switch back. You can see with temperature anomalies, things are running quite a bit below average after about October 2nd. You can see that first initial trough coming in, delivering a nice crisp blast of fall-like air, even winter-like air in spots. And then that just continues. This is October 7th, still below average pockets all along the eastern coast and east of the Mississippi River, with warmer than average temperatures in the western part of the country. And it's not until really October 13th that we really start to see widespread moderation east of the Mississippi. But again, look, you have another little blast of colder air coming in. So while certainty is not that high after about October 15th, it looks like basically the first half of October does look to be quite cool over the eastern part of the country, and very low chances of seeing below average condition or above average conditions with those repeated troughs coming in. And this is very unlike the past few Octobers and Septembers we've seen. If you might recall, the past 5 years we've had some of the warmest Septembers on record in the eastern part of the country. Last year, for example, Washington, D.C., I believe, saw their September average being about 6 degrees above average, which is just insane. Finally, this year, we had an average September, and it looks like October could be shaping up to be a pretty cool month ahead. And this is the European model is in agreement with this cold air coming in. This is 12Z Tuesday, September 9th, that big trough coming in with that cold front extending along right here, just like the GFS. And then it also forms in an upper level low, a secondary low right here, that then tracks basically right along this trough, along the I-95 corridor, delivering ample rains essentially east and along of I-95. 1 to 2 inches is not off the table with this. And then the European also has that big amplified pattern with that ridging in the west and the troughing in the east, delivering those cooler than average conditions for the eastern half of the United States. Now, switching gears, this is the NAM 12-kilometer model. This is just to get a better idea of what's going to be happening with that big cold front as it comes through. Keep in mind that we have some very cold air behind it and still some relatively humid and warm air ahead of it. So that friction between those two air masses and the differences in their thermal energy is really going to cause some pretty good thunderstorms to fire up potentially along that line as it moves to the east. You can see that this is 18Z Monday, a nice line of storms stretching all the way down to the Gulf Coast. And then by the time we reach Tuesday, that line is along the East Coast. And by then, we also will have some interaction with that low pressure right here. And that actually might help a little bit to keep the severe threat down. Usually with these cold fronts, we do have some severe weather since the air masses are so different in nature and so they're so amplified. However, with that low pressure system or that upper level low forming right here, we might have some additional cloud cover basically along the eastern seaboard, and that should help to suppress any instability that tries to develop. So that is definitely something that might limit the severe weather. But anyways, you get the main picture that by about Tuesday afternoon, that cold front will be coming through the eastern United States, especially along the I-95 corridor right here, and then that secondary low tracking along, also amplifying the precip. Now, again, I was talking about the severe weather threat. It's not terribly high, but you can see that with that big cold front coming through, the upper level winds are going to be quite strong. And so that does raise the possibility of having some vertical wind shear with those winds increasing quite quickly with height. And you can even see this is from right around the Virginia Beach area. We do have some backing of winds at the surface coming in from the southeast, with winds quickly veering back to the southwest. And so that does create some wind shear, but not too much. Cape is also not too great. And again, I think with that secondary low forming, we might have some additional cloud cover than expected. But again, I think with that vertical wind shear and the presence of some directional wind shear, especially along the coast, I think for Tuesday you do have a marginal or a slight chance of severe weather basically along the coast and westward by about 50 to 75 miles. I think once you get basically west of I-95, the severe weather threat is not terribly high. But again, I think even along the coast, nothing more than a slight risk at most. Now, switching gears to the Gfs Ensemble Model, this is the temperature anomaly forecast. As you can see, as we go through time, that big trough comes through. Temperature anomalies, look at that, running 5 to 15 degrees below average in spots. So this is not an air mass, not a very weak air mass. This air mass is going to be packing a punch for sure. That air mass then essentially stagnates over the eastern part of the country, and the Gfs Ensemble is showing a very amplified pattern with very warm conditions in the west and very cool conditions in the east. And this really persists. This is October 6th, and still we're seeing those below average conditions in place. And finally, I think by around October 9th, the model does show some relaxing of that persistent troughing in the east. But again, that's about 10 continuous days of just cooler than average conditions in the east coast. So yeah, we'll be having temperatures running about 10 to 15 degrees below average in spots on some days, really making it feel like late fall in many locations. Now here's the Gfs precipitation forecast. Like I was saying, precip will be very amplified along and east of the I-95 corridor with that secondary upper level low forming anywhere from 1 to 3 inches potentially in spots, especially as you go east of I-95 up to the New England states and also into Maine. So definitely some pretty good precip for these areas right here, and also some welcome rain for the Midwest. These areas have been very dry for the past 2 to 3 weeks. So the rain that the model is showing is certainly quite helpful. Now, finally, switching to the National Weather Service temperature forecast, just to give you an idea of how strong this trough is going to be for the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. Look at that. An 80% to 90% probability of below average conditions in this entire area right here. and then a very high probability of above average conditions in the west. So just going to show how amplified this pattern is going to be. Very cold air coming from the northern portions of Canada down into the eastern part of the country, and for precip, essentially widespread below average rainfall. And then as we switch gears to the 8 to 14 day, pretty much the same thing. A bit of a lower probability, but almost the exact same thing. Very dry conditions across the country with that ridge in the west and that troughing in the east with that northwesterly winds, and then below average conditions in the southeast and above average in the northwestern portion of the country. Now, finally, switching to the tropics, this is the velocity potential anomaly for the entire world. This is the GFS model, 18Z run. You can see that the reason we've been kind of seeing suppressed activity is increased wind shear and sinking air, essentially over Africa or the continent of Africa and over the Atlantic Ocean, and that should continue for a little bit. But what I do want you to notice is that by October 1st, that widespread orange that you're seeing over the Atlantic starts to dissipate, and you do start to see even some greens forming in the Caribbean region. So while I think the threat of waves coming off Africa and rapidly strengthening is not quite high, I do think there is potential for some systems to form in the Western Atlantic and in the Caribbean and form in these areas right here, and then potentially impact the United States. So I think after this short break we've had, things will start to get a little bit more active as we head into the start of next week. And this is supported by some of the models. This is the Gfs Ensemble. This is by October 4th. You can see there are some rumors or murmurings from this model that do indicate potential activity in tropical system formation. For example, this is October 8th. You can see the model is showing some systems right here. Again, this is very far out, so it's very the resolution is very low and uncertainty is high. But with this concentrated area of relatively orange color, you can see that the model is trying to pick up something tropical in nature forming. So that certainly is something to watch, especially I think next week, the week after this week. I think the tropical threat for the Gulf of Mexico is a little bit higher with the GFS model indicating some activity, and also the velocity potential depicting some rising air in this region of the Atlantic. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.